the future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which was signed into law by former United States President Bill Clinton back in May 2000, is up for discussion at Nasrec in Johannesburg over the next few days. With AGOA due to expire in 2025, its focus on African countries, AGOA success stories, as well as deliberate on limitations facing African countries in diversifying their export sectors and improving their AGOA utilization. Let's go to Sakina now, and she is there, of course, where AGOA is taking place. That's in Nasrec in the south of Johannesburg, and I know that she's going to be joined by the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Ebrahim Patel. SK, let me hand it over to you.
We are talking about 23 years of AGOA, and of course they're expected to expire in 2025. So we're going to take a look at some of the opportunities that it has presented, some of the shortcomings perhaps, and why some countries and businesses overall haven't perhaps taken up the opportunities presented through AGOA. And as you said, we do have with us Minister Ebrahim Patel, who's of course our Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, and we're also joined by Ambassador Katherine, and she's the U.S. Trade Representative here at AGOA. Minister, Ambassador, thank you so much to both of you for joining us this early. But let's just kick it straight off, Minister. In terms of the 23 years that we have been part of AGOA, not just South Africa, but I suppose to a limited degree you could speak about perhaps what the other countries have benefited from this. So for those who haven't necessarily followed or who are not too sure about AGOA, what would you say have been the main successes?
Well, good morning to you and to all the viewers. Over this period of AGOA, AGOA is a market access arrangement that the United States Congress has put in place for sub-Saharan African countries. And we've seen trade with the United States being a significant part of our trade with the world. If I take South Africa as an example, last year we exported close to 250 billion rands worth of goods to the United States. That's almost $250 billion rands worth of exports. And they include things like cars and fruit and vegetables, so agricultural products, ferroalloys, a range of products. It's given an opportunity for jobs to be created and for young people to be brought into the economy. But if I take the wider lens of the African continent, what AGOA is beginning to do is help support the development of regional value chains. We take the example of vehicles. When we export a vehicle to other parts of the world and to the United States, we're now beginning to pull in rubber that comes from Cote d'Ivoire, that goes into the making of a tire for the car, electric harnesses from Botswana that holds the wiring system of the car together. The copper that is used to send the electronic signals in a vehicle comes from Zambia. The seat covers come from Lesotho. So you're beginning to see Africa doing what it needs to do, which is to industrialize off the back of these market opportunities. And so these are some of the gains of AGOA. Of course, we also see challenges. We need to be able to up the game, get more African countries to be able to export higher volumes of goods, but also more value-added goods. We can't only focus on the beginning stages of raw materials. We've got to move up that value chain. South Africa has been able to do it to some extent. We're the biggest exporter under AGOA. If you take oil out of the equation, then we are by far the largest user of AGOA. But it's in our benefit that we get more African countries to utilize the AGOA benefit. So I think over this period, we've seen some real successes, but we've also identified areas that we need to improve quite significantly so that the dividend to the continent is enhanced and improved.
Ambassador Tai, why is this important to the United States?
Well, following on the African Leaders Summit that President Biden hosted in December last year, the instruction to all of us across the administration was go to Africa, go often, and continue to build on this partnership. I think for us, we have talked a lot about where the future is. for us, in looking at the demographics, and these are statistics that I learned at the Leaders Summit last year, by 2050, 1 in 4 human beings on the planet will be African. The African population is young, it is vibrant, the potential is here. We know that the future is Africa. We have had the AGOA program now for over 20 years, and for us, it is our foundational trade and development program with the continent. It is the basis on which we think we should be building our partnership with sub-Saharan Africa and the African continent. So that's why it's important. And to all of the aspirations that Minister Patel is so incredibly eloquent in describing for South Africa and also for the continent in terms of industrialization, reindustrialization, value chains, I think that we really want to capture the changes in the global economy, the developments here on the continent, including the AFCFTA, and reflect that in an AGOA program that is fit for the times and that is preparing us for the future.
And speaking of being fit for the times, and I suppose this is to both of you, do you think that AGOA has been effectively communicated, and not just to businesses, but generally to, and I mean not just big business, but to small businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises? Do people actually know of the benefit that could be derived? Do they know that they can and how to gain access to the US markets? Do you think we've done a good job on that, Minister?
I think we need to do a lot more. Over the last few weeks, for example, we've been having a road show to provinces across South Africa just to reach out to small and medium enterprises. The American market is very interesting. It's the world's biggest consumer market. Getting in is tough because the rest of the world competes in that market. But once you've established yourself, it is such a large market, it's such a dynamic market that you can sustain your business on the opportunities there. And so we've been successful in getting some small businesses to export to the United States through the kind of technical work we've done. But yesterday I sat down with 30 trade ministers across the African continent, and the constant issue that they raised is the technical knowledge of how to access the American market is not there sufficiently in many neighboring countries. So we've agreed now as African countries, that's our job. We need to be able to share the experience that we've had. And so after this conference, we'll be rolling out a major communication exercise in anticipation of the renewal of AGOA, because over the next 10 years or so, as we get to the next phase of the trade relationship with the United States, we want more women-owned businesses and youth-owned businesses to seize these opportunities. There are some great success stories. We need to scale them up.
The multinationals, I say, are fine. It is the small and medium enterprises, Ambassador Tai, that actually need the assistance.
I think that's absolutely right. And we have looked at the data and seen that utilization across the continent is uneven. There are economies here that have done much better in terms of utilizing the program. And then we have seen that utilization rates can be quite low. So the question is, how can we ensure that the potential of this program is better realized? That is something that we are also going to be really focusing on in supporting the U.S. Congress in a AGOA renewal process over the course of these next months. I think that the point you've made about the smalls and mediums, this is something that Minister Patel and I have talked about in lots of different contexts, but certainly in the AGOA context. I'll just quote President Biden. He's been so clear. His vision for growing the American economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. And that's in contrast to top down. Through our trade policies, which we are bringing a new approach to trade policy in the U.S. Through these trade policies, what we're trying to do is to find ways through our trade programs to grow our economies from the middle out and the bottom up with our partners. And I think that this connectivity between the smalls and the smalls and the mediums is a huge potential for realizing better the gains that are possible under AGOA.
So how does the U.S. market view goods that are made in Africa, so to speak?
I think that's a great question. You know, the U.S. market, as Mr. Patel has so rightly characterized, is the world's largest consumer market. I think that Made in Africa, which there's an exhibition that Minister Patel has brought into life as part of this AGOA Forum, I think that there is real room for that consciousness to grow. I also think that there's a tremendous opportunity, and this is something where, as the U.S. administration, we're really keen on growing our vision, growing the possibilities of connecting our diaspora communities, our diaspora businesses, the small businesses, the medium businesses, with businesses here on the continent to take advantage of one of our greatest assets in the United States, which is the diversity of our population and the connections that we have with the rest of the world, in particular the African continent.
But would you say that Made in Africa is necessarily something that's going to be a hard sell in the United States?
We will only know when we try.
Which is interesting, Minister Patel, from that perspective, because again, you have so many small and medium business enterprises exhibiting here, and obviously they are looking at opportunities. They are hoping to expand their businesses into the US market, hopefully. So in that regard, what advice would you have for them?
So I would start by saying that as the storyline, the packaging of Made in Africa should not be reduced only to the most basic products. Africa has some real sources of innovation. I was making the point yesterday in the Business Forum that we have some advanced businesses here on the African continent. Just in our exhibition, we have a demonstration of radioisotopes that are used in the treatment of cancer, and South Africa is a major exporter of that to other parts of the world. So we've got to build the brand for smaller businesses, and smaller businesses don't only mean low-tech businesses. We have young South Africans who are technology savvy, who are at the cutting edge of new inventions, new ways of doing things. So the first thing would be to aggregate. If you're a very tiny player, it's hard to sustain businesses there. So we're getting smaller businesses together. The second one is to build little mentorships and partnerships between the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and small businesses to help them with the technical access to the AGOA program, to know how to fill in the forms, how to access the necessary shipping support and so on, because it's that logistics. It's not only producing your goods, but getting the logistics through to the final consumers in the United States. And the third thing for smaller businesses is to have the dedication and patience to break into that market. A number of businesses we've got 500 businesses demonstrating their goods from across the continent at the Made in Africa exhibition here today. And many of these smaller and medium-sized businesses are hungry to get into the United States market. We're helping them with all of the platforms of support. Finally, networks. We've brought together a Black Exporters Network that has many small and medium-sized businesses sharing their own experience now. As one of them make a breakthrough, they're able to share that. So government can be a partner, but we've got to get the energy and the dynamism of the private sector directed. And final point is partnerships with large businesses. It's not a complete, there is a very important role by large businesses in supporting smaller players in their supply chain, but also in jointly moving together in accessing the American market. So these would be some of the key areas.
I have to start wrapping this up, and coming into the conversation, I was thinking about 35 participating countries exporting 1,835 types of goods into the US market, and I wanted to say that needed to be expanded upon, but given that there are these hiccups, perhaps that's a question for another day. But I quickly want to ask about the beneficiary status for the 4 African countries, Ambassador Tai, that will be removed: Central African Republic, Gabon, Niger, and Uganda. So in that sense, there is a perception on the African continent that the United States wants to play Big Brother and tell us how to run our own domestic policy. So why are those countries being removed? And, again, is it prudent for the United States perhaps to punish a country for making laws for themselves?
Well, I would look at it quite differently. Minister Patel described the AGOA program as a market access program, a unilateral one on the part of the United States in terms of creating preferential access for sub-Saharan African countries into the United States. And of course, there are eligibility criteria. Now, I understand that there may be some sensitivities, but if you look at those criteria, they go to human rights, rule of law, political pluralism, and a number of other areas. I think that it's probably more appropriate to understand those eligibility criteria as parameters for Africa and African countries to come up with African-based solutions along those parameters. And the definition of those parameters are so important to us because they are actually expressions of our economic values as well. And they are areas that make other economies on the African continent and around the world more compatible economically with ours. And I think if it's helpful to think of it that way, I think it's really important in terms of accessing the U.S. market that these elements reflect vectors of compatibility. And when these eligibility criteria aren't met, there are consequences. We know from our largest economic players to the smallest ones that these elements are aspects of an investment environment that they are very keenly interested in, because these are elements that make for and foster better and more predictable places to invest. And I think that if we think of it in that way, hopefully it makes more sense as an economic matter in terms of compatibility and partnership.
Well, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much for engaging us this morning, U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Katherine and Minister Ebrahim Patel, Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition here in South Africa.